Welcome back to the Average Jacks podcast. As you can see, we're not in the studio, but we are back remote and going back to basics today. But I'm very happy to be joined by Meidi Goodson, who we've been trying to do this for a little while, but we've finally got it boxed off. So with the podcast, I always like to start at the beginning and then work to where you are today in sort of your life. And
Mhm.
obviously having Sam on the podcast a couple of times, he was the one
Yeah.
that linked us off together and sort of said this would be a good conversation. And he mentioned about sort of almost like a previous life for you, not putting words in your mouth, but you started in sort of like the catering business and things
Yeah.
like that, if that's correct. And
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
do you want to tell people what you do now and a bit about that transition and how that came about?
Yeah. Yeah. So, if I start with the transition without sort of getting into too much detail, and it's lovely to meet you, Jack, finally, and thank you so much for inviting me on the
No,
podcast.
no,
It's
my
brilliant.
pleasure.
So yeah, I started off 16 years in catering, mainly because I hated the school I was at. I changed
Mm,
schools at the age of 14, ended up in quite a rough school. My mother had moved area and stuff like that, and so I couldn't wait to leave school. So I was given a choice, which was you have to go to college, so choose what you want to do. Um, and I did a catering management course, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. In fact, I enjoyed it an awful lot more than I thought I was going to be honest. 16 years later was when I actually came out and transitioned from catering. So I trained in chefing. I trained in a Michelin star restaurant in the Cotswolds. Loved it. Exhausting work, working all hours under the sun. In those days, I never realized that I was actually a workaholic, but very soon I recognized, probably in my early 40s, that I was very much a workaholic.
mm,
Um, and I very much become a workaholic really to get the best connection with my parents. That was very much approved of. The harder you worked,
yeah.
sitting on your ass doing nothing, relaxing was really frowned upon. So it's quite interesting now to look back and see where the negative patterns came from that I'd adopted. So that was my first 16 years. I opened at the age of 25 with my first husband. I opened the first brasserie in Warwickshire. Nearly went bankrupt at the age of 29 because we paid far
Wow.
too much money for the company. Huge lessons learned. In fact, I can honestly say that as horrendous as that period of my life was, it was by far the biggest learning of my life. And it taught me about business. It taught me how to make money. It taught me that we don't run businesses to massage our ego. We run businesses to be profitable.
Mm,
And it was quite a shock to everyone around me, thinking that I was running this really, really successful restaurant that seemed very successful. And actually we were losing money. It was just like pouring it down a drain every month.
wow.
So that was massive, really good experience. I ended up at the end of my catering life. I was asked to go and join a company as catering manager. Back in the 70s, it was a group known as the Slug and Lettuce Group,
Mm,
which was a privately owned business, but later sold out to various breweries, etc., over the years. So I started off with about 19 bars and restaurants that I was responsible for in terms of the catering profitability of those ventures.
wow.
And I ended up with over 100 under my belt, later going on to open the first of the All Bar One chain, which was actually in Birmingham, and was called Carpe Diem. And it was right in the financial heart of Birmingham on
Yeah.
Great Charles Street. Loved all of that. Brilliant. Then I think, to be honest, got quite jaundiced about everything to do with serving the public, putting up with people who were constantly pissed and all this sort of stuff. So I did get very, very sort of, just very jaundiced about
Yeah.
serving the public. And I knew it was time to move on. I then went into what was the family manufacturing business. That's a very long story that I could spend the whole podcast on, so I won't. I ended up sales and marketing director of another company moving forward, which was a company called Dar Lighting in Banbury. Those days we had, I think, 15, 16 million turnover. And
Wow.
I basically managed all the key accounts on the high street, the Marks and Spencers, British Home Stores, John Lewis
Yeah.
Partnership, etc. Loved that job. So big transition. But again, it was still working with people. It was building relationships. And I realized very soon with the various references that I obtained later on that that was very much my strength, was relationship building.
Yeah.
And how important it was for success to be really authentic and to be able to build authentic relationships with people, and that those people who were not authentic tended not to get the business and they weren't trusted, etc. So I think that's something that was just innate within me, that it was important to connect with people and how to do
Yeah.
that. From manufacturing, I went on an amazing holiday for 2 weeks to Thailand at the end of a second divorce. And I had this very much this pattern in my life where personally and in terms of business, I seemed to be quite successful. But in terms of my personal life, it was this disaster that was falling around me.
Yeah.
Never believing in those days that it was anything to do with me. I just thought it was bad luck, you know. And then I moved from that. I kind of decided I really needed to slow down, and I wanted to stop the more, I mean, I can't really call it corporate existence because at 16 million turnover, that's not corporate, but I wanted to get out of that exhaustive way of working. I'd actually taken over from a colleague who was a director of the same company who'd had a mental breakdown, a nervous breakdown. And after 2 years of doing his job, I realised why he'd had a nervous
It's not a
breakdown.
good foreshadowing, is it, when you sort of take the
Absolutely right.
reins from someone like that?
Absolutely right. So again, that taught me a huge amount as well. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I needed to get out of being, 24/7 working. So I ended up, I had a great mate who got her degree as an acupuncturist from Oxford. She was one of the first mature women to get an Oxford degree in acupuncture. And she suggested to me, while I was doing my 6 months notice as a director of DAR, she suggested to me, how about we go into business together? Do you fancy doing something in terms of holistic health? I thought that was a great idea. And literally a couple of weeks down the line, we got the opportunity to take over the lease on a very well-established holistic health clinic in Stratford-upon-Avon. And the coincidences and the synchronicity of that was just phenomenal. I found out I knew the landlord very well. So taking over the lease wasn't a problem at all because he trusted me. And I did that for several years. I was running the business. I wasn't a therapist in those days. My business partner was the main therapist as an acupuncturist. We only had 2 small rooms. It was in the centre of Stratford. And so my job really was to try and make 2 rooms and renting them out profitable, renting to different therapists. And what I discovered was that each therapist who wanted to rent a room off me, the one thing that most of them were not very good at was sales and marketing and promoting themselves. And I soon realized that if I didn't give them help with the sales and marketing, they weren't going to be renting rooms off me for very long.
Full circle.
So I kind of offered it as a service really to help them. And so to do that, I would say to them, listen, let me experience your therapy. And then I can write really authentically about it and I can help to promote you. So we had everything from regular chiropractors, McTimoney Chiropractic. We had counselors, naturopaths. We had, you name it. You name the alternative therapy, Reiki healers, all sorts. Yeah. I think I ended up being the one person in the business who actually understood what each of the therapies could do. So it was an amazing learning, and trying all the therapies was fascinating, obviously very nice as well, But the other thing that I realized about the therapists, and this is very significant when I became a therapist myself, was that each therapist believed they had the cure-all answer for whatever it was. And I realized very quickly that not one of them had the cure-all answer, that they were very good and that their therapies were contributing massively to helping people. And I like the whole holistic approach and what have you. I was also personally selling vitamins and minerals in the clinic and doing lifestyle analysis for people as a sort of a complementary thing, really, that I
Yeah.
could do. And I was working at the time with an organic vitamin mineral supplier in America who was a large privately owned company called Nature's Sunshine, and their vitamins and minerals were really quite potent. So I learned quite a lot about that because I also did a training course with them. I then became pregnant after a second divorce and meeting a first ever boyfriend from when I was 16 years old, which was my son's father. And incredibly long story, very, very short. I was 43 years old, wanting to have this blissful pregnancy and water birth. And I'd
Yeah.
got all the ideas of how fantastic this was going to be. And the bottom line was I was placenta previa, so which prevented me from having giving birth naturally. And it was also quite serious. So I ended up being in hospital for a month before I
Wow.
gave birth, which ended up being an emergency cesarean because I nearly died before I had my son. So that was all very dramatic.
Yeah.
And I ended up being diagnosed with an autoimmune condition after I'd had my son. And I then started to study self healing. And that's how I became a therapist. So I swallowed books on self healing
Yeah.
and realized that although I'd been diagnosed with what at the time was a condition called fibromyalgia, and it was an autoimmune condition, that really nobody in the NHS was able to tell me how to get well. And that was pretty a pretty dramatic 4 years of my life, really, because I ended up, my son's father had a mental breakdown as soon as my son was born. So that was fairly dramatic too.
Mm.
And as a single parent, also poorly,
Yeah.
it was quite scary. It was like, well, I'm 43. I've gone from feeling great and fit to feeling 95 overnight.
Yeah.
Um, what am I going to do? What am I going to do for work? What am I going to do um, to sort of get through this? And I'd set myself up as a small business consultant locally because I'd moved to Skelmersdale. And that's another long story. And as I say, I just realized at one point I was going to have to stop work.
Yeah.
So luckily for me, I had at the time, I stressed substantial savings, and I stopped and realized I had to stop and support myself and focus on getting well,
Mm.
and that there was nothing else that was going to be more important than that. And so with the therapies, I spent a lot of money on a lot of different therapies, from Reiki to hypnotherapy to emotional freedom technique to acupuncture to massage to Ayurvedic therapies, you name it. I
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of, put myself through it to see what would happen. And to be quite honest with you, initially I gave hypnotherapy too much credit for what ended up being my recovery. And
Wow.
the simplest technique that I'd learned, which was emotional freedom technique, which is also called tapping, was I later realized was actually more responsible than anything for my recovery. So I spent 4 years recovering and then decided, right, I'll start at the beginning. I did Reiki first and became a Reiki master. I then became a clinical hypnotherapist. I then studied semi in parallel emotional freedom technique.
Mm.
Eventually, I became a teacher of EFT so that I could certificate practitioners in emotional freedom technique. And then I also studied neurolinguistic programming, which is basically everything to do with how we think and communicate with the world. And I discovered that really, if I put all these therapies together, if I blended all these therapies, I was going to have a really powerful toolkit to help others get well. That's
Yeah.
how it began, really.
I mean, it's an incredible story, even with the bits that you made a little bit shorter than explaining the full lot, and sort of points that you made there, and having sort of finding out you wasn't very well, going through that traumatic period before, you know, having your son and being ill for that long time. What stuck out to me there is, do you feel like if you hadn't been in sort of the business world and, you know, like a cutthroat sector where you have to put yourself first, and like you said though, it was all pretty much work, wasn't it, and not a lot of personal life per se prior. Do you think that give you the tools to not almost like lay down and wallow in almost like self-pity about this condition? Because it seems like as soon as you found out about it, like you said, you were straight into the books. How am I going to fix this? And I feel like sometimes when people get that diagnosis like that, they can almost revert inward rather than do something that you did. And do you think that comes from that experience, or is it just something that was already in you?
I think that's a brilliant question. And I think it's probably quite a multifaceted answer, to be honest with you, Jack. I think, so I think one, it was within me. I've got a fairly strong personality type, which, I remember when I first did some isometric testing and whatever, it was like, I don't know, it was a bit of a shock to think, you know, oh, blimey, you know, and who are the people that are in my category of personality? And unfortunately, it was people like Margaret Thatcher and Gordon Ramsay, which I don't know if you've done any personality profiling, have you?
No.
It's fascinating. It's ever
Yeah,
so
I can
interesting.
imagine.
I can send you a link actually, which is a free link, which is brilliant. And the most popular company for personality profiling was a company called Myers-Briggs. And a lot of big companies would use their personality profiling, and they would literally give people a position in their company, big companies like Coca-Cola, for instance, and it would be dependent on the person's personality as to where they would
Wow,
position them within the organization.
that's crazy.
So that was something I found really, really interesting, and I studied a lot, and I use a lot with my clients now. So I think I'd always been a coper, but to a ridiculous degree. So I think it applies to many of us. You know, we learn a certain position in childhood in terms of how we best get connection with our primary caregivers, and that there's nothing more important to a child than how do they get connection with their primary caregivers. Nothing else is more important. For me, it was by being capable, being really good, you know, not pissing mum and dad off. You know, it was,
Yeah.
and that applies to a lot of people where they become what we, and I now know we could term rescuers. So they put everybody else's feelings ahead of their own and everybody else's emotional needs ahead of their own, because as a child, they learnt that is how to get the best connection with their primary caregivers. So, you know, we often say, and I'm going off on a tangent a little bit, but we often say that every mum and dad, myself included, will say, oh, I unconditionally love my child, you know. And I think most parents do say that. And actually, if we were really, really honest with ourselves, yeah, we like to think we unconditionally love our child. But most parents, especially with little children, much prefer a genuflecting child than they ever do somebody who is a pain in the arse and a problem. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So, and it just depends really on how we started our life as to really, I think, whether we have extremely good coping strategies as we grow up or not. For instance, for all those kids and teenagers who went through a situation with mum and dad where, and there's a lot of different aspects to this. So a lot of what I'm going to say is kind of seems like quite a sweeping statement, but I qualify there's a lot of aspects to what I'm saying. So for instance, I learned very quickly at the age of 11 when my parents were rowing continually. They ended up getting divorced. The divorce was really acrimonious. I was left living with a mum who couldn't cope very well, who was extremely anxious at the time. Those children in similar situations can go one of two ways. They can either become real troublemakers and rebels and decide the world's an unsafe place and hate everyone in it, or they can become massive rescuers where they become a parent far too early and they start
Mm.
to take on parental responsibility. In fact, for a lot of children, they can become the third parent within the relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and who you're explaining it, like I can almost see like friends and acquaintances in the past where this
Yeah.
has, been the case.
Yeah. So that creates and can create an incredibly capable child.
Mm.
The problem with that is that in later years it can build a huge amount of resentment, often if it's recognized towards the parents, because no child is supposed to take on adult responsibilities at the age of 11 or 12
Of
or
course.
younger. Yeah.
Mm.
No child is supposed to feel responsible for the adults in their life. And I think for a mixture of reasons, I ended up feeling very responsible for my parents, particularly my
Mm.
mother. And I never understood until much later in life that I'd never been taught to tune into my own feelings and honor myself and do what
Yeah.
felt good for me. No one had ever said, "Oh, darling, how are you today? How are you feeling, sweetheart? What's the problem? Come on, let me
Yeah.
help you with that. What shall we do? What would help you?" That tends to not be a conversation that many parents have. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like I'm just like processing it all. It's super sort of interesting, and you
It's
can,
big. It's a big subject. It's a
yeah,
massive subject.
it's a massive subject, and like for me, I'm I'm fortunate enough where my parents have always been very supportive, and we can always have conversations. But to know friends and, like I said, acquaintances where these sort of
Mm,
these situations that you're explaining, I've maybe seen, or you can see it in their personalities and their traits. It's
mhm.
sort of, I don't think humbling's the right word for me, but it's making me think about it in a completely different
Yeah,
light.
yeah. I mean, I now, after, I don't know, what, about 18 years of doing what I do and running a busy private practice, I now see quite clearly something I never did see, which is that the majority of people's issues, if not all, come from negative patterns in families.
Yeah.
And it's a huge subject.
Yeah, and I like one of the questions I wanted to ask you was what do you most commonly see in your practice? Obviously, you can't give too much away, but like a vague
Yeah, yeah,
answer
no,
that we
no,
could
no,
go into it.
no. I can describe
Yeah.
that generally. Let me just go back one step because I can be very guilty of not finishing what I
No.
started
No.
to explain. So I make myself stay on track these days. So in terms of coping as a single parent, there is a very negative old saying called "needs must when the devil drives."
Mm.
And it's a dreadful expression because it's so negative.
Yeah.
But I think when you find yourself in a situation where you don't have a choice or you feel you don't have a choice, and this is something that is huge, is that most people believe they do not have choices. Now, I did have a choice. I could have given up. I could have been very poorly. I could have been taken into hospital. I could have become helpless, hopeless, powerless. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, but partially my upbringing, everything I'd learnt. So my perspective of the world from the day I was born to that moment had actually given me the tools to get through that situation and to make it work.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. It's that
Now,
sort of,
every single person would have dealt with it differently.
yeah.
Every single person would have dealt with it differently. So the fact that I had become a workaholic, which is the way I got best connection with one of my parents, the fact that I had the beliefs about myself, which I did, which was very much, I am not worthy, which is why I need to put everybody else's feelings ahead of mine. Yeah.
Mm.
All of that can drive somebody to be able to cope in extreme circumstances. But I would also say it, and this is a big subject, but it's also part of what gets them to the place they are at where they need to cope with those negative situations in the first place.
Yeah. It's almost like a double-edged sword.
Yes. Did that make sense?
Perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm just it's so interesting, and like to just hear it from just the way it's explained so easily, and then like I said, it just gets so many cogs turning in my brain where you try and think about, the examples that you've seen that in the past. And would you say that that is the most common thing you see, is them sort of negative pathways from childhood that you have to almost deal with in your clinic?
It that is huge, but we could break that down. So we could look at it and we could say that what I'm always looking for are negative patterns.
Hmm.
Whatever the pattern is that's negative, whether it's the way somebody's speaking. So as soon as someone starts talking to me, I will immediately pick up on the negative language patterns they're using. So if somebody comes through the door and they're very fired up and they're very energetic, or they're very feeling quite dramatic, whatever the emotion is, if they sit down and they say to me, I have to, I should do, I must do, I ought to, if they use all that strain language, then invariably that will often tell me that that person has been putting themselves through massive strain all the way through their life.
Yeah.
Because they have a deep-seated fundamental belief system that everything is about strain. Have to, should do, ought to, must do. And you hear that in people's language a lot. But I have to do this. I have to look after my parents, even though I don't like them. And I should do that because, the world tells me I should do that.
Yeah.
And I really ought to do that. And I feel so guilty that I don't, all that language starts to tell you. And the reality of what somebody is going through also tells you that the only way you get to a negative place is if there are very negative patterns running in your life. Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, those negative patterns may have started with trauma in childhood. So let me give you an example of one negative pattern. So actually, I'll use my own example. So the kid at primary school, who nowadays they don't do it like this but I'm an old fart. So, but where you get asked to stand up in class and recite your times tables, that used to be a favourite one,
Yeah.
So 8 years old, standing up in class, reciting your times tables. Parents are going through a divorce. You're buzzing in fight or flight. So you're not connected with your parasympathetic nervous system, which is a child can't learn in fight or flight. So all these kids with ADHD can't learn when they're permanently stuck in fight or flight. They need to be able to relax. So you're reciting your times tables. The whole class laughs because you get it wrong. Humiliation. Yeah. All those eyes on you, everyone laughing. Now, there'll be a couple of things that will happen from that experience. If that child doesn't get over it, and they've got nobody to share that with and talk to about it and understand that it's a really negative thing that's happened. If the parents said, oh, don't worry, you'll be all right, just get on with it, love, which doesn't help at all. I grew up, because of that experience, thinking always that I was shit at numbers and maths.
Yeah. Which it would, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So when I became a director of a company and when I became managing director of a company, I spent a fortune on accountants because I really believed that that was my Achilles heel. That was the weakest thing for me. And I must support myself with people who were really good around numbers because I was rubbish.
Yeah.
I never understood that it's because of a trauma I went through in childhood. Does that make sense? So that was a negative pattern that was set up. And humiliation for children is one of the most damaging things for a child.
It's something you always remember, isn't it? You can always remember it's like the bad dreams. You always tend to remember the bad dreams rather than the good ones, and your childhood
because
memories.
They're actually trauma. So the bad dreams are often the little T traumas. So we could talk the big T traumas, which would be, say, a monumental car accident where you lose your limbs or whatever, to the little T traumas, which are the stuff that happens in everyday life, and particularly in childhood. A child's brain isn't fully developed. Children's brains are so delicate. Many parents, because they don't study child psychology before they have children, they will often talk to their children as if their children were adults, not appreciating that their child doesn't have anything like the understanding that they have.
Yeah. The concept just isn't the same, is it?
Well, often just that can be quite abusive to a child.
Yeah.
I recently had a situation when it wasn't recently, actually, it was last year before, I was in a film that had just been launched that was like, you know, a Hobbit type film that was supposed to be suitable for kids and adults. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact film it was. And behind me was sitting a dad with what must have been a 6-year-old child. Couldn't have been older than that. And the child was begging dad to take him out of the pictures, take him away from the cinema. And the dad was basically telling this 6-year-old to man up.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there listening to it, and it's so hard sometimes not to want to interfere.
Yeah.
But I knew that this dad was encouraging his child to be traumatized. And one of the things I often used to work with children a lot was their fears and phobias. Now, I've lost count of the amount of fears of spiders that actually came from Aragog, or Aragon, is it? The spider in the Harry Potter films.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the snake in the Harry Potter films. I mean, most of that stuff, there was so much content within those films that most children would really struggle to cope with and not end up with nightmares. And so that is work, because I do a lot of work on using techniques like emotional freedom technique, particularly to lift fears and phobias, and also to lift past trauma. So it's quite interesting when you get talking to somebody and you find out, because I go through an initial 2-hour consultation with a client and ask them various questions, which helps me to ascertain where the issues and where the problems are. So I'll ask them open questions like, you know, tell me about any family stresses. Well, just that in itself is obviously very revealing, you know. And then going on to look at, do you have any fears? Do you have any phobias? If you wanted to live your life over again, what would you choose to skip? That's a brilliant question for eliciting where are the issues and where are the problems. So that initial consultation with a client is just to establish what is the history, what is the thing that's troubling that person. So coming back to why do people come to me? So if somebody comes to me because they're severely depressed, that's always because there are issues in the past that haven't been resolved. Yeah. If somebody comes to me highly anxious, that's usually because they have a lot of fear about what's going to happen in the future. And if somebody is suffering with both depression and anxiety, which is common, then you know that each day is going to be pretty crap, because they're spending far more time being controlled by what has happened or the fear of what's going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
So that's 2 areas which people, you know, can come to me for. Another one can be a very obvious trauma. So it can be they've been in a serious car accident. It could be that they're physically very poorly and they don't understand how they got there. Now, what I now know happens to all of us is if we are not able to deal with and cope with our day-to-day stresses, and we're not able to release our day-to-day stresses, eventually we rack and stack the negative experiences, the small t traumas, the stress and anxiety, whatever, until we eventually become physically poorly.
Just the build up of like a pressure cooker, it just eventually blows.
Correct. And what I've discovered in the, I mean, I don't know how many, somebody asked me, I was doing a talk last year, and somebody asked me, how many clinic hours have you done so far? And I hadn't got a clue. And I very roughly worked it out that it was over 10,000 clinic hours.
Wow.
And when I look at that, that's a lot of case studies. And so many people do not recognize the connection between their mind and their physiology. So if I go back to my own experience of fibromyalgia, which is where I started as a therapist, offering to support and help people with that particular condition, I now know the profile for anyone who suffers with fibromyalgia. Without question, they will be a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Because they believe that everything has to be perfect for them to be accepted and for them to be lovable. Yeah. Wow. They possibly, because of that, will be a workaholic. Yeah. They will not have a balance of fun and recreation and downtime. So there's a lot of, depending on somebody's personality and depending on their pattern, their negative patterns of behavior and thoughts will depend on how any type of dis-ease or illness manifests itself within the physiology.
Yeah.
That is something I'm absolutely convinced of now.
Why do you think people stay in these negative feelings for so long? Obviously, I know we're sort of hardwired to tilt towards negativity, aren't we? But I know it's something you say that, you can change these negative feelings.
Yeah.
From your experience and, seeing these people over these thousands of hours, why do people feel like they have to stay in these negative feelings?
I think mainly they don't understand where they've come from, and they don't know how to release them. And actually releasing them is a lot easier than people believe. And people also, if somebody feels not worthy, they certainly don't believe they're worthy of going to see a therapist.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that you get that a lot.
So, well, that's quite a boundary. So if we look at it, we see if somebody doesn't accept themselves, then they'll be forever trying to prove themselves. So they're always looking for validation. So that in itself is a negative pattern.
Yeah.
Because that negative pattern of I must prove myself, I need that validation because I didn't get it as a child. That is what can turn somebody into a workaholic. Yeah. And then we have another pattern, which is based on anyone who believes they're not worthy and doesn't deserve often sabotages themselves before they even become successful. And that's called shrinking syndrome. So if you make yourself small enough, if you're not noticed, can't get it wrong if you're not noticed, can you?
Yeah.
You can't make it any worse. Yeah. So that is a pattern that would be a negative pattern. That's a very common one. There's another pattern that's called Schadenfreude, which is getting a great deal of pleasure from somebody else failing.
Yeah.
Which is a very interesting one. And that's always people who don't accept themselves. So anyone who doesn't accept themselves will maybe feel quite guilty, the fact they do feel a bit of pleasure from watching somebody, say they've got a mate who's been so successful and done brilliantly, and then suddenly everything goes tits up. And they think, oh, thank God for that. Almost as though they're competing with them. Do you know what I mean? The endless need for approval is something that prevents most of us from being in control of our lives and being able to say no. It also creates us putting on a persona to please everybody around us.
Yeah.
And so those behaviors are going to end up with a pretty unhappy person and a very unfulfilled person. But to actually go to see somebody who can help you unpick this stuff, who can help you and just hold a mirror up for you, just to hold a mirror to say, look, this is, why did you say that? How does it feel when you say that? What would it feel like if you felt that instead?
Yeah.
So it's having somebody who understands these patterns. So, we can look at, there are 5 main emotions that people get stuck in, but they don't know how to unstick themselves from those emotions. So a classic would be somebody who has problems and issues with anger, Well, that person who has the issues with anger feels so guilty about the fact that they do. The first thing is they don't even want to admit they've got the problem.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, like almost embarrassment and sort of pushing it to one side.
Because it's all about being less than. I'm not good enough. Well, why do you want to admit what you're not good enough at? Everyone spends their life covering up what they're not good at.
Yeah.
As opposed to embracing it and saying, do you know what, mate? I'm shit at that.
Yeah. It's like social media, isn't it? No one puts on about the shit things that they're doing or the bad things. Mm.
Exactly. So if we look at somebody who is, sorry, that's not supposed to be. If we look at somebody who's angry, that's always a case of their boundaries have been always been crossed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And their needs aren't being met.
Mm.
Now, it takes quite a lot of conversation and understanding to be able to accept that is the only thing that has created all this anger for you. And that usually goes back to childhood.
Yeah.
Because that same person who didn't have their needs met in childhood believes they don't deserve to have their needs met. They won't put boundaries in place to honor themselves
Yeah.
because they don't believe they're worthy enough to do that. Yeah.
Mm.
And so the anger perpetuates and keeps going, and they get frustrated, then they blow. More and more frustration, then they blow. Now, if somebody then teaches you how to put boundaries in place, if somebody teaches you that you've always been worthy, there's never been anything wrong with you. Your parents were just diverted for whatever myriad of reasons where they weren't able to show you how to love yourself, show you how to honor yourself, show you how to tune into how you feel,
Mm.
because they were deflected sorting all their own crap out. Yeah.
Mm.
So anything that we're suffering with as an adult, we can change it. So fear is someone who feels a real lack of stability and security. So all we need to do is find out, well, why do you have that fear? Where did that fear come from? Oh, well, it came from the day that Dad left home.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Did anyone talk to you about that when you were 5 years old? Well, no, not really. And, Mum was so upset and this was happening and that was happening. Okay. So that child never had their needs met. They were never helped. It was never talked about. And that happens to so many things that happen to children where the parent doesn't mean to make the child the last person to help, but they just want it all to go away. They just want it all to be resolved. Are you with me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if an adult's own emotions are overshadowing everything else, then that adult doesn't have the capacity to be able to understand just how deeply their child is hurting and how much help the child needs to get over what it is. So that child can grow up believing that every adult's going to leave them, or
Yeah.
anybody that they love and care about is going to disappear.
Mm.
Now, that's all subconscious stuff. It's not in your conscious thinking mind that you've established that, which is where techniques like hypnotherapy can come in. But also just having a therapist who understands where this negative pattern started in your life and why it's left you being so triggered back to childhood events that you
Yeah.
don't even realize that's what's happening. So for many people, they want to move forward in their life. Yeah.
Yeah.
They want to be able to focus on that's where I want to go. Yeah.
Mm.
And how do I go from here to there? But they're constantly triggered backwards into old experiences that they're being triggered into, where the subconscious mind is saying, oh, whatever you do, Jack, don't do that. You know what
Yeah.
happened when you were
The
5?
alarm bell.
That. Yeah. And that could be like, nearly drowning when you were swimming as a kid. It could be anything. Yeah.
Mm.
So these beliefs that are very negative, that are not serving us, are often formed through childhood. And those, for any of us who choose not to work on ourselves, we are going to be stuck in a lot of negative patterns that we will just keep on passing on to our own children.
That you've sort of answered my question before I even asked it. Was for everything you're explaining there. I mean, I'm just so sort of intrigued and lasered into what you're saying. I'm just a lot of nodding dogging at the minute. But what I was thinking then was maybe 20 years ago, before that, therapy was almost a bit taboo, wasn't it? I think people sort of were like, oh, like you said, bottle it down, head down, carry on, that like blitz mentality that people seem to have. Do you think that now, with society and resources like this and easy access to maybe more understanding around self-reflection, who you are, seeing like tidbits about this, do you think it will help like the future generations, because therapy is less of a taboo subject now and it's being more socially embraced?
Yes and no. I think we're possibly getting better at talking about stuff
Mm.
in some cases, not in others. I think one of the hardest things to, and I see it with a lot of families, is families do not want to recognize the negative patterns that they're passing on from generation to generation.
Mm.
Because to look at the self and to actually to own it, to take responsibility for our actions, to take responsibility for our behaviors, can be very challenging. Because if
Mm.
somebody feels insecure already, to then have it pointed out to them, well, are you aware now what you're passing on to your children?
Yeah, I'm the problem,
Um,
like sort of saying this is me doing this. But
mm,
how often can you think about in life where you've actually stood up and gone, oh yeah, actually it's me causing this, and I'm sort of not knowingly, but
yeah.
you would just bury your head in the sand naturally because that's the mentality.
Yeah, the key issue is being an adult, actually truly having turned into an adult,
Yeah.
where you can genuinely be accountable.
Mm.
And there are many, many adults out there who have no ability to take accountability.
Yeah.
And that is where a lot of things go wrong. So, do I think the current generations are going to be able to take more accountability? Probably not.
Mm.
I think we are in society generally now, with social media and everything else. I think we are promoting narcissism to such a degree.
Almost allowing it to be
Yes,
acceptable rather than
we
dealing
are, we
with
are
the
allowing
root
it and
cause.
promoting it in exactly the same way that we promote alcoholism.
Mm.
You know, it's
Yeah.
cool to get pissed. It's cool to drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, when somebody has a bottle of wine, nobody sits there as your mate and points out how many brain cells you've just killed and how much white matter's just disappeared. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
There are so many things that are made out to be acceptable, socially acceptable. And I think that's my biggest worry now, is the sorts of behaviors and also the lack of connection. So I think we are going through societally a time where there has never been such a lack of connection with family.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think it's actually been actively discouraged.
Mm.
So how many families do you know that all get together on a Sunday and have a nice roast lunch together and it's home cooked or whatever?
Yeah. It's less than the opposite.
It's very, very few.
Mm.
How many couples do you know who actually sit down and eat together, or as opposed to get their own meals when they want to eat and when they're ready and whatever? That there is, you just look at how things are when you go into a supermarket. I had there was a lady, lovely lady, who was serving behind the counter in a Marks and Spencer's the other day, and I stood to wait at the counter to be served as opposed to go to the help yourself checkout,
Yeah.
do it yourself checkout.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she said, "Are you paying by cash then?" And I said, "No, card." "Well, you could do it there. I said, "I know."
Yeah.
I said, "I'm a bit of a freak because I really like connecting with people and talking to them."
Yeah.
And it's the sort of thing I do where Sammy, I can see my son, he's like, "Oh God, here we go." But I do feel really, really strongly about it. And, when we look at, I think the majority of people of my age, particularly, and I'm coming up 67, they do not recognize what is going to happen in terms of AI in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Not in the next 10 years or 20 years. Literally in the next couple of years, there's going to be more people out of work, and it will be too late to look back and say, shit, I wish I'd objected to my supermarket putting in self-serve checkouts. I wish I'd objected to digitalized banking or whatever. Because everything that's being done is creating more and more and more isolation and separation.
It's removing the human element of everything, isn't it? It's
Correct.
like, if you go online and you want to speak to customer service, you're going to chat to the AI bot for 3 hours beforehand you even get to
Yeah.
talking to a human. By that point, you're riled up and pissed off in my case, and then you can't even have the real human connection because
Yeah.
you're already going in on like the back foot and riled, and then it's something you want to just get over with and done. And saying it like that, I've never really put it into that perspective before. So again,
I honestly think it's frightening. I
mm,
truly think it's frightening because I don't think it's going to be for the betterment of society.
no,
So you have so many teenagers and individuals now who are hiding behind screens. Yeah. And it's not just how bad that blue light is for them and how bad those EMFs are that are pinging off everything that are in the household. I mean, I look at the new houses that are being sold with all these smart everything in there.
yeah,
The whole property is nothing else but just millions of EMFs bouncing off the walls. You know what I mean? Because there's nowhere for it
yeah,
to go.
no,
None of this stuff is good for us. So it's killing our circadian rhythms. Everyone is wearing Apple Watches. We're being tuned into our devices.
yeah. It's almost
And
cyborg mentality. I mean, I'm guilty for it, but it becomes an extension of your being rather than something that is. It's like your phone. Like if you left your house without your phone, you'd be like, "Oh shit, where is that?" Rather than
did
just
you know
walking
that
away.
did you know that, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over
No,
you.
no.
Did you know that was the main plan of Apple, was to make our iPhone an extension of our arm?
Mm, I can
That
imagine.
was the plan.
Yeah.
And how successful has it been?
Well, I mean, it's probably 99% success rate, really, if you think about
Yeah,
it.
you're absolutely right.
Mm. And
Absolutely right.
it's so interesting. Like, obviously, I work at a university, and I've been there for a long period of time. I started there when many moons ago, when I was a bit younger, like 18, and the difference in society and community, especially, is unbelievable.
I know.
It's a regression at a rate that and that's not even being dramatic. Like I am someone that I like talking to people. This is why I did this. This is why I like connecting with other humans and finding out different avenues of people's lives and just the interest of speaking to someone who's you know a lot more knowledgeable about something than I am and then learning from them. And
Yeah.
it's so difficult now to even have a conversation that probably lasts more than 5 minutes if you're not in this sort of format where not forced. I don't want to say it's forced, but do you get what I mean? It's
Yeah.
almost it's an expectation that this conversation will last X amount of minutes, hours, etc. But if you go
Yeah.
into the normal world, people want to be done with you after. Are you all right? Yeah, you bang done. Back into your phone, back into what you're doing, and it's sad, isn't it? It really.
I think it's really sad. And I
Mm,
mean, the third emotion I was going to mention was sadness. And I think it's quite interesting that sadness happens because of a lack of understanding and love.
mm,
So if we look big picture societally, how huge is the lack of understanding and love?
unbelievable.
Yeah. And I think without wanting to be pessimistic, because there's a lot of aspects of life I think that can be very positively looked at, yeah, because
Yeah,
we each have our own perception. But I think unless people start to exercise the choices they have, it's worrying.
yeah,
And we all have choices. People, I truly feel that the majority of people are being programmed to believe that they're helpless, hopeless, and powerless to go against the change that's being promoted.
mm,
And I think the change that's being promoted is promoted in psychological terms through creating a lot of fear, which, as I've already said, is lack of safety, stability, and security. Well, you create enough fear
Mm.
Yeah. And what are you going to, what's going to happen in society? Now, if
Panic,
people say, now,
turmoil.
hang on a minute, I am actually powerful.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm only one person, but there's an awful lot of us, and we could positively influence a lot of outcomes.
Yeah.
So if we refused to pay by anything other than cash, if we refused to go to the self-help, do-it-yourself checkouts, if we insisted on connecting with individuals, yeah, there are so many things that we can choose to do as an individual to stop some of the changes that we feel, and all of us, there's so much opinion out there, the people saying, but I don't want this to happen, I don't want that to happen,
Yeah.
but
There's not a
they
lot of
don't do
action.
anything about it.
Yeah. So just to segue maybe into like, the other side of this spectrum that we've been talking about. What are the differences between people who, you know, when they make that willing change, what are the characteristics when they come out the other side and have that positive outcome from things like therapy?
I think that I always say to clients, I can't make any claims and I can't make any promises.
Mm.
The only promise I can make you is every time you come and see me, you'll leave feeling lighter than you arrived.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest point. And I think it's essential for us to, I think it's not self-indulgent to work on ourselves and to change our own negative patterns, because we automatically pass the benefit on to our children,
Yeah.
whether our children want the benefit or not, because we are constantly showing them by example how to be better, if
Mm.
that's the journey we're on. So if we think of a married couple having kids, if that couple, they are the example for their children as to how to have a happy, connected, healthy relationship.
Yeah, of course.
So if that relationship is volatile, abusive, aggressive, miserable, sad,
Mm.
whatever, what are you showing your children?
Yeah.
So I believe very strongly that we as parents have a responsibility to improve ourselves. And I believe we each have a responsibility to look at historic negative patterns within families and within our own family, and to change it.
Yeah. It makes so much sense, and when it's said, you don't really ever sort of consider. I think for me it's probably more difficult because I'm not a parent, but like looking back and then again seeing things and thinking about it more so
But
and
I
looking
don't think you
about.
have to be. I
Yeah.
think when we actually work on ourselves, when we learn to set boundaries, when we're able to say no, when we're able
Mm.
to honor ourselves, know that we're worth it, yeah,
Yeah. 100%.
we pass that benefit on to everyone we connect with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was definitely guilty of, like I've said it before on the podcast, probably said it a few times, is I was a people pleaser for a long time. I'm not saying I'm not now, but like I always said, the best skill that I ever learned was to say no, and it
It's huge,
it was
Jack. It's
revolutionary.
massive.
Yeah.
It is. It's huge. So most of us, much of the time, communicate within what we call the drama triangle.
Mm.
Now, the drama triangle was an idea that was developed by an amazing man called Kaufman, who it's shown as an inverted triangle, so wide at
Yeah.
the top and the point at the bottom. Many of us communicate within that triangle, and it
Mm.
starts because of the positions that we adopted and how we got connection when we were children. So those children who learned to prioritize everybody else's feelings become the rescuers on the top left corner. Those children who didn't get the connection they needed and life was very volatile at home became the persecutors.
Mm-hmm.
So those with quite toxic behavior, the bullies of the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got the victims at the bottom who could never lift their head above the parapet without getting it knocked off.
Yeah.
And they remained in that sort of victim mode. Now, the key point is with the drama triangle, it's a big subject again, is that each position is actually a victim position because it relies on victims to
Yeah.
operate. So every time you poke your nose into somebody else's business and take it from your own business, where you might need fixing, you might need all sorts of focus. But every time you choose to go and interfere into somebody else's life without being asked, we are being rescuers.
Mm.
And all we're ever going to do when we do that is deplete ourselves and get incredibly frustrated when the person we're rescuing ends up resenting us. Because what we're trying to do, those top points of the triangle, see themselves, both the rescuer and the persecutor, see themselves as superior to a victim. Now, all we need to do to get healthy and get centered and strong is to offer people help, only do things for others when they ask us, because then they're confirming that is what they want. Yeah? I really would value your help. And at the rest of the time, to keep your focus primarily in your own business and getting your own life sorted, which is far more challenging. It's far easier to go into somebody else's world and put them right.
Yeah.
And that's where our arrogance and superiority come from, you know?
Yeah.
Those behaviors. We don't need to judge others. We don't need to make a habit of looking at everybody else and telling them where they're shit. Every single one of us knows what we're crap at. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
What we don't know enough of is actually what we're good at. But to do that, we need to focus on ourselves first. Not in a selfish way, but in a way that says, actually, I need to get my own business sorted before I even think about proffering advice to anybody else. So I'm a great believer and advocate for don't just talk the talk, walk the walk.
Yeah, 100%. I think everything needs action. I think, as you know, if you just, this is what I always say about, like, you can be a learner and then never actually use that information to do anything. Like, you can read all the books in the world, but, well, I mean, you're a perfect example of that. You read lots of books and then you use that knowledge and information to then create action and go.
But I also had a lot of counselling to start with.
Yeah. But, like, I think that's it, isn't it? You've got to sort of, again, I think self-reflection and having the ability to have that mirror held up, be that through therapy or, you know, your own self. It's pivotal, isn't it, to becoming a better version of you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Jack, if we just ask ourselves one question, do I love my life? How much joy do I feel every day? Yeah. And if the answer to that is a negative, you've got work to do. You need to do some stuff to change, because you will be following negative patterns. Yeah.
It's quite a simple question.
It's a very simple question. And I don't know how many people I speak to on a daily basis who can honestly, truly say that they have a joyful life.
Yeah. Which is so sad, isn't it?
Yeah. And a lot of what's negative will just be because of the beliefs that people are holding that just aren't serving them. And that's what creates the negative patterns. You know, it's like the person who feels guilty when they focus on themselves. It's a question I get asked all the time, but oh, if I put myself first, I feel so guilty. Yeah. Well, anyone who suffers with a lot of guilt triggers is somebody who's been overly responsible for other people's emotions all their life.
Makes perfect sense.
And when you look at that and you understand that, oh shit, that's what I've been doing. Oh my God, that's what I was taught to do as a kid. Yeah. You know, what mum wanted always came first, what dad wanted came next, or what my siblings wanted. Yeah. And when we look at that and we can say, okay, so actually that guilt trigger in me is inappropriate. I was just taught to feel guilty when I ever honored myself and tuned into how I feel. And when I did more of what felt good for me, I was made to feel guilty. Now, I know as from the coaching work that I do, because I'm also a coach as well as a therapist, I know from the coaching work that I do that if anyone on this planet has not got a decent level of satisfaction with each area of their life, and particularly if they don't score highly, if you were scoring between 0 and 10 for your fun and recreation in your life, if that is under a 5, I guarantee you're probably pissed off with your life.
Yeah.
Because you've never had the help to create the balance that you need to feel more fulfilled and be more self-accepting and be able to honor the self, which you learned when you learned to say no.
Well, it becomes community, doesn't it? I think like fun and recreation, it very much, if you're doing them things, it's an outlet for one. But then if it's fun and usually recreational includes others, you've again got that human connection and
It's
you've got
it's
that
it's
capacity.
really important, and I think it would be I think beautiful to see people actively trying to bring people together in their
Mm.
communities. I
Well,
mean,
that go
I've
on,
lived
sorry.
where I live for 20 years, and most of
Mm.
my neighbours I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. I can. I've lived where I've lived now for coming up to like 6, 7 years, and there's probably the majority you don't know. You know a handful of
Mm,
that, and then you go from there.
mm.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And like my actual role where I work is a social integration program for sport, and
Wow,
that when you see it and it
wow,
works and you get them stories and you chat to them people,
yeah,
it's so fulfilling. I mean, it's not me out there delivering it. I'm very fortunate to have a large team of volunteers that
yeah,
deliver the program. But you know, when you see that social integration, especially in a very isolated place like a university, when people are on their own for the
yeah,
first ever time, they're away from
yeah,
these not dominant figures, but these prominent figures in their life where,
yeah,
all they've ever known is being with them. It can be a very isolating place, especially when they're living on. So to see people integrate and get
yeah.
involved and find that community with people they wouldn't
Brilliant.
necessarily think, it's
Yeah.
so rewarding and fulfilling.
Have you ever noticed as well that sport is a secondary issue?
How do you mean?
So I used to run years ago when I was building my business. I used to run a wellness for women group on a
Yeah,
Wednesday, and it was so funny. When I started it, I used to spend ages preparing for what we were going to do, and we
yeah,
do a bit of emotional freedom technique, we do a bit of hypnotherapy to finish with. I'd produce teas and coffees and biscuits and fruit and all this sort of stuff. What I discovered after only a few weeks was what I was actually doing and offering these ladies was almost irrelevant. They just wanted to all get together and have a good old chat.
yeah, yeah. I get your point now. Yeah, definitely. Like, again, sort of. I've played rugby league for the majority of my life, and obviously people want to win and they want to be involved, and like there is a competitive element to it. But
Yeah,
then friendships you make and the socials that you go on,
yeah,
9 times out of 10 you remember the socials that you go on more than you remember the games that you played. There's only very few big games or bad games or great games that you remember, but you can remember all the times that you met up or you went out and you did that and you had that human connection and that good time. Like even if it's just something as minuscule as like a volunteer day where everyone was
yeah.
mucking in doing something, you remember things like that, and it's
And I
yeah, it's a great
absolutely agree
point.
with you. And I a big bee in my bonnet again, which we could probably do a whole session about, is about our education system now, which I
Oh
feel is failing so desperately. And if you look at secondary school, the biggest issue with every kid that I work with who's a young teenager is lack of connection, lack of friendships. Bullying often comes into play far too much. And it's because schools do not focus anything like enough on a free and open social element within schools.
no.
A school, I believe, needs to actually help children to make those connections and make time every day for there to be fun and enjoyment within that environment.
Mm, yeah.
And it just doesn't happen.
Well, how many
I,
kids enjoy art? How many kids enjoy drama? How many kids enjoy PE?
yeah,
As compared to them, maths lessons,
yeah,
English lessons, science
yeah,
lessons. I
yeah,
reckon if you was to do like a survey at any general school, them sessions were, there's more freedom and creativity and social aspect to it. They would be the
yeah,
ones that
yeah,
come out trumps on top of, there'll be a few outliers. Like I loved history, like that was something that I
yeah,
was interested in, but I hated English. Would
yeah,
loved it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
So it's interesting.
Well, I think that's the other, but I think the biggest problem, if I go through with teenagers their issues, say with various teachers, and this applies across the board, kids will always dislike the teachers who are not authentic.
Yeah,
It's so interesting. But those teachers who are truly authentic and have real passion for their subject, all the kids will love them.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they're the ones that'll probably stop being teachers,
Absolutely
because
right.
I've known many teachers in other roles that I've had in or friends, and the
Yeah.
ones that are genuinely passionate about teaching kids and improving children's lives or like teenagers' lives, they all leave because they all say the same thing.
Mm.
It's systematic. We have to treat them as numbers, not people. We have to get the grades. We have to do this. We have to do that. And it becomes just like, well, it's a system designed to create labourers and, people working in mills and pits. It's 100 years old, the system, and it's never
Absolutely right.
changed, has it? And
Absolutely right.
you see that now because people aren't going into them jobs anymore because there aren't them jobs. So, and I think, like, I have to watch what I say, obviously, but I feel like university is almost, it used to be a place where you wanted to go. You
Yeah.
wanted to go to be,
Yeah.
the outlier, the first in your family. You was excellent at a specific subject, so you went and got the nuance and the honour of getting a
Yeah.
degree. But now it's almost as watered down and diluted
Yeah.
because everybody has it. It's almost like your GCSEs. It's almost like your A levels. The sort of grandiose of them, that status is diluted a lot because, again, it's just funnel
Yeah.
neck of getting people into that for business, money. And I'm not saying that's everywhere. People do go for the right reasons occasionally, but again, I think a lot of people go because they feel like they have to.
Mm. I absolutely agree with you, and I think often it's a parent's agenda that
Mm,
kids follow, and that's a big issue too. It's a big
yeah.
issue. I
Mm,
think often, parents have these ideas of where they want their children to go to. And we now know from a psychology point of view that one of the worst things we can do as a parent is to measure our children by their achievement in terms of that's what we give them praise for. That's, because there is nothing about that is it's quite a control mechanism often within families,
mm,
that a child who possibly doesn't believe they're worthy anyway is then told, unless you get X, Y, and Z results, or unless you go to and get that degree or do whatever, they're going to be, they believe they're a disappointment.
yeah.
And there's probably nothing more damaging you can ever do for a child than tell them they're a disappointment.
Mm,
It's off the scale, whereas if we could truly teach our children to really tune into how they feel, tune into what's right for them, tune into what feels better for them, I think the result would be an awful lot more interesting. We'd get kids who were really satisfied and probably enjoying life a heck of a lot more. And
100%.
because whatever we feel passionate about is what we're going to do well at. If we don't feel passionate about it, we're not going to do
Mm.
well at it.
That's what I say. Like, again, this for me, obviously, it's more of a hobby than anything else, but it never feels like work. It never feels like a chore. The sitting down and talking to people is the
Yeah,
best bit. The editing and, all the other stuff that unfortunately comes with it.
yeah,
I can't always say the
yeah,
same, but
yeah,
it is, it's so true that when you follow your passion and you truly align with your values, that,
yeah.
satisfaction and happiness is
Oh, it's
there.
huge. But you
Mm,
see, if you've never taught your children to tune into how they feel,
mm,
if you've never talked about feelings, and you've only ever communicated on the basis of thinking, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? We it's almost like it's almost like we're frightened of talking about feelings,
yeah,
until they become very extreme. And then, of course, we get really worried, you
yeah.
know?
Like the intervention, that only gets to the point of intervention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
No, it's very interesting. So going back to your question a while ago about society and do I think that people's discussions about having therapy and the availability of it is going to make a difference? Honestly, I don't know.
mm,
I honestly don't know, because there is so much that, as that awareness is increasing, there's also so much else that's happening that is not helping, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Again, which again makes sense when you think about it. Like, if you was to be rational, you can, like you mentioned there, you can almost see that there's going to be a lot of enabling as well, with it being more in the forefront and not actually discussing the root cause and allowing people to maybe continue these negative behaviors just because, unfortunately some people can make a quick buck out of it, or they can get some sort of status, etc., etc. So again, it's so interesting to hear it from your perspective and someone who's like not too much in one camp, but is being rational about everything. So I mean, I reckon we could probably talk for about 4 hours, and I would just be completely intrigued with everything you're saying, because it has flown by. I've only just looked up now and seen how long we've been going, but honestly, it's been brilliant. But
It's been great to talk to you, Jack.
it's been amazing, and I mean, I've not done much talking, which will be unusual for people who listen. But no, it's been amazing to sort of just listen to someone in your field, and a lot of why I was just sort of sat there like nodding was just sort of reflecting on everything you were saying and
Yeah.
trying to relate on it. And there's definitely things that I'll take away from this and look at other people in a different light, I think, and use that and take it away, and maybe again think about more of my actions, and if I've been in that drama triangle somewhere, and try and remove myself from it, and keep channeling into doing what I need to do for me. And yeah, that has been amazing, so thank you. But before we go, there's always two questions I ask people.
Yeah.
The first one is, what 3 habits or routines have made the biggest difference to your progress, and what would you recommend, and would you recommend them to the everyday person?
Okay, so I think I felt very blessed that my mother dragged me to kicking and screaming to learn a technique called transcendental meditation when I was 14 years old. Now looking back on it, I realize I've been ADHD all my life, and that process and that commitment to a technique twice a day for 20 minutes has been absolutely invaluable in my life. It's been incredible. And something now that I view it's like cleaning my teeth. I believe we all need an inward dive, at least twice a day. I provide for my clients, all my clients, I provide hypnotherapy audios to give them a guided deep dive into a really relaxed state. It's something I believe is incredibly important. So that's one thing that I think, without question, made a massive difference to my life. I think I was actually very anxious before I learned transcendental meditation as a kid. I was quite highly strung. The other thing I think that is massive is getting out in nature. Huge. Personally, I have a favourite sort of 90-minute circuit I do at Formby because I absolutely love the beach. Nothing feels better for me than being in a massive wide open space with the smell of the beach and the sea and the sound of it. So that for me is a good 2, 3, 4 times a week thing that I do. We also know from research that I found when I was studying psychology with the OU, it was really, really interesting looking at the amount of research that's been done on how incredibly powerful being in nature is for us. So whether it's being in big, expansive spaces, but grounding ourselves as well. So, I mean, ideally, getting into nature, particularly on the beach, take your shoes and socks off, ground yourself. Grounding is hugely important. I think now at nearer 70 than 60, my son has influenced me and influences me and inspires me continually, to be honest. He's just, he's amazing. We talk about all this.
He is. He's a great man. He's a very wise individual for sure.
We talk about this stuff a lot, and he has done so much research in his own field as to, I know he's just launched his a handout from his book of, what everybody needs, literally, as in your body, as in your physical body. And I love it. And I use it as a handout for all my clients because it's just brilliant, about getting out in sunlight and all the stuff that blocks our endocrine system and everything else. And I think the biggest thing he's now influenced me with is, Mum, it's bloody important that you actually lift weights and you do go to the gym, and to keep yourself, because I'm a bit arthritic, and I spend far too much time seated with clients. So actually now my focus has become very much on, as we get older, it's so important we do gently and carefully, but that we do exercise and lift weights, and that gym has a very positive benefit to us as we get older.
100%.
And I love swimming as well. Swimming is great. That's fabulous for me. But yeah, so he's influenced me a lot on that. And I also have regular physiotherapy. And I wish I hadn't got myself to a point whereby I was desperate for physiotherapy before I started having it.
Yeah.
I think it is a brilliant preventative. But I think there's a lot of things that are brilliant preventatives. I teach every one of my clients emotional freedom technique. I couldn't live without it. It's amazing. And if ever you wanted to do demos on stuff or have a demo of hypnotherapy for all your listeners or anything else, I'd be happy to do it for you, Jack.
Yeah.
But so yeah, looking at every aspect of our health and wellness, knowing what we need to do to prevent disease, to prevent us being ill. I think we need to all, coming back to us taking responsibility and accountability, I think we all need to start being accountable for our health and
100%.
not rely on emergency visits to A&E or the doctors.
Prevention is always better than reaction, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So if you can keep on top of it and you can do it, you'll always appreciate that, I think. And I'm definitely the same camp of you. Playing rugby for a long time and then getting physio later on in life, it's something I wish I'd have done maybe a little bit sooner, because when you feel the benefit, it's amazing. So the final question before we wrap it up: if there was one habit or routine you could introduce or reintroduce to your life, what would it be and why?
I think actually now I would like to focus. I've spent my life focusing on work and a lot of duty stuff as a single parent in a good way, and I've wanted to do that. I think probably, and this is going to sound almost fatuous, but actually focus on a bit more fun, a bit more fun and connection, and really looking at that bucket list, you know, and committing to a bucket list. Because I think we're a long time gone, and I realise there's a lot of things that I've said for many years I'd love to do. And I'm realising that unless I commit to them, they're not going to happen,
Yeah. That's great. It's about season the day, isn't it? Yeah, going back to that Carpe Diem, when you mentioned it about that place that you opened, full circle. But thank you so much for coming on. And again, I wish we had all day, because I could just just sit and listen and just sort of like be in awe. And the explanations were so easy to understand and very, very well put. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and obviously your own personal journey with how that came across.
You're so welcome. And I would actually say to anybody, try a couple of hour consultation. See how you get on. See what you discover about yourself, and see. That would probably give you enough of a taste in 2 hours to see how things could get better.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to do that personality test. So
I'll send it to you.
Yeah. But before we go, let people know where they can find you, where they can get in touch, where they can, book in or get in touch for these consultation sessions and find out more about you and, your therapy and the coaching services that you provide.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely fine. So I have a website, and it's www.meidigoodson.co.uk. That's it.
Well, I'll put that down in the description for everybody to check out. And thank you again so much. It's been brilliant.
No, lovely. Thanks so much, Jack. Really enjoyed it. Brilliant. Take care.